What happens when the man you underestimate the most becomes the one who shapes your future? At Lincoln High, a disrespectful teen learns a life-changing lesson when the janitor he mocked rises to the role of principal, transforming not just the school, but everyone in it, including him. This is a story about respect, redemption, and the power of second chances. It was a crisp Monday morning at Lincoln High, a suburban school known for its diverse student body, but also its unspoken divides. The halls buzzed with chatter as students prepared for another day of classes, their laughter echoing off the faded lockers. Among them was Dylan Carter, the school's basketball captain and resident star. With his athletic talent and confident charm, Dylan was admired by many, but his privileged attitude often alienated those he deemed beneath him. As Dylan strolled down the hallway with his teammates, his laughter rang out above the crowd. His gaze landed on Mr. Samuel Carter, the school's janitor, mopping up a spill by the cafeteria door. Samuel, a man in his early 50s, moved with quiet efficiency, his demeanor calm and unassuming. His uniform was neat but worn, his hands calloused from years of labor. To most, Samuel was a fixture of the school, present, dependable, but invisible. "Look who's hard at work," Dylan said loudly, drawing the attention of his friend. He gestured toward Samuel, smirking. "Careful, Mr. Carter. Don't break a sweat." Samuel glanced up briefly, his expression unreadable. "Good morning, Dylan," he replied simply, returning to his work. Dylan wasn't finished. He deliberately knocked over a nearby trash can, its contents spilling across the floor. "Oops," he said with mock innocence. "Guess you'll need to add that to your to-do list." Laughter erupted from Dylan's friends as Samuel straightened, his eyes meeting Dylan's. There was no anger in his gaze, only a quiet strength that made Dylan's smirk falter for a moment. "You'll learn one day," Samuel said evenly. "That respect doesn't cost a thing." Dylan rolled his eyes, brushing off the comment. To him, Samuel was just a janitor, a man whose life, he assumed, had amounted to little more than cleaning up after others. As the day went on, Dylan's actions became the talk of the school. Some students laughed along with him, enjoying the spectacle, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Ms. Rivera, an English teacher known for her fairness, overheard the story from a group of students. Shaking her head, she made a mental note to address Dylan's behavior the next time she saw him. Meanwhile, Samuel continued his work without complaint. He mopped floors, emptied trash bins, and fixed a broken locker door, his quiet resilience a stark contrast to Dylan's loud arrogance. Few people noticed the wisdom in his eyes or the way he carried himself with dignity. As the school day ended, Dylan's antics were already fading into the background for most students. But for Samuel, the interaction lingered. He knew from experience that people like Dylan often hid insecurities behind their bravado. One day he'll understand, Samuel thought to himself as he locked up the janitor's closet. What no one at Lincoln High knew, least of all Dylan, was that Samuel Carter was far more than the school's janitor. His past, his knowledge, and his quiet strength would soon shake the very foundations of their assumptions. The following week, Dylan continued to push the boundaries of his behavior. His initial insult toward Mr. Carter had been a fleeting moment of entertainment for him and his friends, but it planted the seeds for something more troubling. Buoyed by the laughter of his peers, Dylan made Samuel his target whenever the opportunity arose. It started with small acts of mockery. As Samuel quietly swept the hallways after lunch, Dylan would toss crumpled paper or candy wrappers onto the floor in his path. "Missed a spot, Mr. Carter," he'd say with a smirk, his voice carrying across the hallway. His friends chuckled, their laughter a chorus of complicity. Samuel, as always, responded with calm composure. He would pick up the trash without a word, his steady demeanor unshaken. But Dylan mistook Samuel's silence for weakness, fueling his belief that he could get away with his actions without consequence. One afternoon during basketball practice, Samuel entered the gym to repair a loose bleacher seat. Dylan noticed him immediately and saw another opportunity to perform for his teammates. "Hey, Mr. Carter," he called out, his tone dripping with mock respect. "Think you can fix my jump shot while you're at it?" His teammates laughed, slapping each other on the back. Samuel paused his work and looked up, his gaze meeting Dylan's. "I think that's a job for your coach," Samuel said evenly before returning to the task at hand. Dylan's smile faltered, but only for a moment. He wasn't used to being brushed off so easily. Determined to regain the upper hand, he turned to his teammates and loudly remarked, "Guess it's hard to hear advice from someone who spends his days mopping floors." This time, the laughter wasn't as unanimous. A few players exchanged uncertain glances, their smiles fading. Even Coach Jenkins, who overheard the remark, frowned but chose not to intervene. Dylan, however, remained oblivious, basking in the attention of those who still found his antics amusing. The next day, the tension escalated further during a school assembly. As students and staff gathered in the auditorium, Dylan spotted Samuel near the entrance, guiding latecomers to their seats. Leaning over to his friends, Dylan whispered loudly, "Looks like the janitor got promoted to usher." His friends chuckled, but the joke didn't carry as well as he hoped. At the assembly's conclusion, Dylan saw an opportunity he couldn't resist. Near the back of the room, Samuel was collecting discarded programs left behind by students. Dylan deliberately spilled his soda on the floor and called out, "Better get that cleaned up quick, Mr. Carter, before someone slips." The room grew quiet, the sound of students shuffling out momentarily pausing. Samuel looked at the mess and then at Dylan. He straightened, his calm gaze locking with Dylan's. "You know, Dylan," he said quietly, "it takes a lot more strength to build someone up than to tear them down. Maybe you should think about what kind of person you want to be." Dylan laughed, but it sounded forced. The students who had overheard the exchange didn't join in. Instead, a few cast disapproving looks his way. Ms. Rivera, standing nearby, folded her arms and shot Dylan a warning glare. Later that day, Ms. Rivera pulled Dylan aside after class. "Dylan," she said sternly, "your behavior toward Mr. Carter has gone too far. I don't know what's gotten into you, but I suggest you take a long, hard look at yourself before you say or do something you'll truly regret." Dylan shrugged, feigning indifference. "It's just a joke, Ms. Rivera. Why is everyone taking it so seriously?" Ms. Rivera's expression softened, but her tone remained firm. "Because it's not just a joke. You're disrespecting someone who works hard to keep this school running, someone who deserves better." Dylan rolled his eyes and left without responding, but Ms. Rivera's words lingered in his mind. The breaking point came a week later during a pep rally. As the students gathered in the gym, Samuel stood off to the side, ready to clean up after the event. Dylan, emboldened by the energy of the crowd, decided to take things further. During a break in the rally, he grabbed the microphone and said loudly, "Let's hear it for Mr. Carter, everyone's favorite janitor, cleaning up our messes so we don't have to." The laughter that followed was scattered and uneasy. A teacher quickly took the microphone back, glaring at Dylan as the crowd fell silent. Samuel remained composed, but this time, a flicker of sadness crossed his face before he turned and left the gym. For the first time, Dylan felt a pang of discomfort. The reaction he'd hoped for, uproarious laughter and cheers, hadn't come. Instead, he noticed a few students shaking their heads, whispering to each other. Even his closest friends seemed hesitant to laugh along. Dylan brushed it off, telling himself he didn't care. But deep down, he couldn't shake the image of Samuel walking away, his shoulders slightly hunched. The incident at the pep rally would prove to be a turning point, not just for Dylan, but for everyone who witnessed it. Little did Dylan know, Samuel Carter was not the man he assumed him to be. After the pep rally incident, whispers about Samuel Carter began to spread through the school. Some students who had once laughed along with Dylan's jokes started questioning their behavior. Teachers who had known Samuel for years began to speak up about the quiet, unassuming janitor who had become a fixture of the school. One day, Ms. Rivera sat in the teacher's lounge with her colleagues, sharing a cup of coffee. "Did you know Samuel has a master's degree?" she said, her voice low but filled with admiration. A young math teacher looked up in surprise. "Wait, what?" Samuel? Our janitor? Ms. Rivera nodded. Years ago, he worked in education policy, helping to design programs for schools in underprivileged communities. I don't know all the details, but something happened, and he left that world behind. He's been here ever since, keeping his head down and doing his job without complaint. The math teacher leaned back in his chair, processing the revelation. And to think, the students treat him like he's invisible. Ms. Rivera sighed. Not just the students. We've all been guilty of taking him for granted. Meanwhile, the mystery of Samuel's past began to grow among the students. A few curious whispers turned into a quiet buzz. Some had overheard teachers mentioning his qualifications, while others had noticed his calm authority in moments of chaos. One student remarked, "Mr. Carter never raises his voice, but people listen when he talks. That's not just any janitor." Dylan, however, dismissed the rumors as exaggerations. To him, Samuel was still the same man who swept the hallways and mopped up spills. "You really think a guy like that could have done anything important?" Dylan scoffed to his friends one afternoon. "He's just a janitor." But Dylan's certainty began to waver after a chance encounter in the library. While killing time before basketball practice, he spotted Samuel sitting at a table surrounded by stacks of books. Curious, Dylan lingered nearby, pretending to browse the shelves while eavesdropping. Samuel was helping a group of students with their homework. His voice was calm and steady as he explained a complex math problem. "It's not just about finding the answer," he said, pointing to the equation. "It's about understanding the process. If you know the process, you can solve anything." The students nodded, their expressions a mix of relief and respect. One of them smiled and said, "Thanks, Mr. Carter. You make this stuff so easy to understand." Dylan watched in silence, a strange feeling settling over him. He had always assumed Samuel was just a janitor, someone with no real authority or importance. But watching him now, Dylan saw a man who commanded respect without demanding it. Later that evening, Dylan's curiosity got the better of him. He approached Ms. Rivera after class, feigning nonchalance. "What's the deal with Mr. Carter?" he asked. "I keep hearing stuff about him being some kind of big deal." Ms. Rivera looked at him thoughtfully. "Why do you care, Dylan? You've never shown him any respect before." Dylan shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Just curious, I guess." Ms. Rivera sighed and leaned against her desk. "Samuel Carter is one of the most educated people I've ever met. He used to work in education policy, helping to shape programs that impacted thousands of kids. But he left that career after a personal tragedy, something he doesn't talk about much. He came here to rebuild his life, and he's been quietly making a difference ever since." Dylan frowned, feeling a pang of guilt he didn't quite understand. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" Ms. Rivera raised an eyebrow. "Would it have made a difference? Respect shouldn't depend on someone's title or accomplishments. Everyone deserves it, Dylan, especially someone like Samuel, who's done so much for this school without asking for recognition." That night, Dylan couldn't shake the conversation from his mind. For the first time, he began to see Samuel in a new light, not as the janitor he had mocked, but as someone who had quietly endured far more than Dylan could imagine. Meanwhile, Samuel himself remained focused on his work. He was aware of the rumors swirling around him, but chose not to address them. To him, titles and accolades mattered far less than the relationships he built and the example he set. One afternoon, as he fixed a broken locker door, a freshman approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Carter," the student said, "is it true you used to work in education policy?" Samuel paused and gave the student a small smile. "Yes, that's true," he said simply. "Why are you working here then?" the student asked, genuinely curious. Samuel's smile grew faintly wistful. "Sometimes life doesn't go the way we plan, but every role we play matters, no matter how small it seems." The student nodded, his respect for Samuel growing. Word of their conversation spread, further deepening the sense of mystery surrounding the janitor who seemed to be so much more than he appeared. For Dylan, the weight of his actions began to press harder. As he pieced together more of Samuel's story, his feelings of guilt and regret grew. He started to realize that the man he had spent so much time mocking deserved not only his respect, but his gratitude. What Dylan didn't know was that Samuel's quiet dignity and hidden strength would soon take center stage, changing the school and Dylan forever. The annual spring fundraiser was one of the biggest events at Lincoln High, drawing students, teachers, parents, and even alumni to support the school. The gymnasium buzzed with excitement as volunteers set up booths, the basketball team prepared for their exhibition game, and a local band tuned their instruments. Samuel Carter, as always, worked in the background. He helped string up decorations, carried tables into place, and ensured everything ran smoothly. He moved quietly, acknowledging others with a polite nod or a warm smile. But no matter how much he did, there were always some who overlooked him. Dylan arrived late, as usual, surrounded by a small group of friends. He smirked as he passed Samuel, who was sweeping up some spilled popcorn near the entrance. "Better keep that broom handy, Mr. Carter," Dylan said, loud enough for everyone around to hear. Samuel paused briefly but said nothing. He simply continued his work. The fundraiser kicked off with a flurry of activity. Parents bid on items in the silent auction, students took turns at the carnival games, and the basketball team warmed up for their scrimmage. Dylan basked in the attention as spectators cheered him on during the exhibition game, his arrogance as visible as ever. As the event went on, the principal, Mr. Howard, took the stage to announce his upcoming resignation. The room fell silent as he explained that he would be stepping down at the end of the school year to focus on his health and spend more time with his family. "I want to thank all of you for making my years at Lincoln High so memorable," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "This school has a bright future, and I'm confident the next leader will continue to build on the legacy we've created together." Whispers rippled through the crowd as people speculated about who would take Mr. Howard's place. The assistant principal? A district administrator? No one expected what would happen next. As the evening wound down, Dylan and his friends wandered near the concession stand, bored and looking for entertainment. Spotting Samuel cleaning up near the band's setup, Dylan saw another opportunity to get a laugh at his expense. "Hey, Mr. Carter," Dylan called out, grabbing a half-empty soda cup from a nearby table. "You missed a spot." With exaggerated motion, he poured the sticky contents onto the floor, earning a few nervous chuckles from his friends. Samuel looked at the mess, then at Dylan. His expression remained calm, but for the first time there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Dylan," he said softly, "I've told you before. Respect doesn't cost a thing." The comment struck a nerve with Dylan, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "You keep talking about respect," he said loudly, "but look where it's gotten you. You're just a janitor." This time, the crowd around them didn't laugh. A few students exchanged uncomfortable glances, and some parents looked on with disapproval. Even Dylan's friends seemed uneasy, shuffling their feet and avoiding eye contact. Ms. Rivera, who had been nearby, stepped forward. "That's enough, Dylan," she said firmly. "You've crossed the line." But before she could say more, the gym doors opened, and Mr. Howard walked in, followed by several school board members. The group approached Samuel, shaking his hand warmly and exchanging words that no one else could hear. A murmur spread through the crowd as Mr. Howard called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing through the gym, "I'd like to take a moment to introduce someone very special. He's been a part of this school for years, quietly working behind the scenes to make it a better place for all of us. And tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that he will be stepping into my role as principal of Lincoln High." The room fell silent. Please join me in congratulating Mr. Samuel Carter as the new principal of Lincoln High." For a moment, the gym remained frozen. Then, slowly, applause began to spread, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. Teachers, students, and parents rose to their feet, clapping and cheering for the man they had so often overlooked. Dylan stood rooted to the spot, his face pale. He stared at Samuel, who had stepped forward to shake hands with Mr. Howard and the board members. The janitor, was now the principal. As the applause died down, Samuel stepped to the microphone. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady and warm. "It's an honor to take on this role, and I promise to do everything I can to make Lincoln High a place where everyone feels valued and respected." He paused, looking out over the crowd. "Respect is something we all deserve, no matter who we are or what we do. I've spent my life believing in the power of education and the importance of treating others with dignity. And as your principal, I'll make sure those values guide everything we do here." The crowd erupted into cheers again, but Dylan could barely hear them. His mind raced as he replayed every insult, every cruel joke, every act of disrespect. Guilt washed over him, heavier than anything he had felt before. As the event came to a close, Dylan lingered near the gym doors, watching Samuel shake hands and accept congratulations. His friends had long since disappeared, but Dylan couldn't bring himself to leave. Finally, summoning all his courage, he approached Samuel, who was standing near the stage. "Mr. Carter," Dylan began, his voice hesitant. Samuel turned to him, his expression neutral but expectant. Dylan struggled to find the words. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything." Samuel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "But remember, Dylan, respect isn't just about what you say, it's about what you do." Dylan nodded, his chest tight with emotion. "I'll do better," he promised. Samuel offered a small smile. "I hope you do." Samuel's appointment as principal sent ripples through Lincoln High. For years he had been a quiet presence, someone most people took for granted, but now he stood at the forefront of the school's leadership. On his first day in his new role, Samuel walked into the principal's office, a modest room that felt worlds away from the janitor's closet where he had spent so many years. He sat behind the desk, taking in the framed certificates, the neatly organized files, and the chair that now represented his authority. It was a moment of reflection, but Samuel knew there was no time to dwell. There was work to do, and he was determined to lead by example. Word of his promotion spread quickly among students and staff, and the reactions were mixed. Some teachers who had always respected Samuel felt vindicated, while others who had underestimated him wrestled with embarrassment. Among the students, there was a sense of curiosity and disbelief. How could a man who had spent years cleaning their messes now be the one in charge? Samuel began his tenure with a clear vision: to create a school environment where every student and staff member felt seen, heard, and valued. He implemented an open-door policy, inviting anyone, students, teachers, and even parents, to share their concerns and ideas directly with him. Unlike the previous administration, Samuel made it a priority to spend time in the hallways, the cafeteria, and even the classrooms. He greeted everyone with the same warmth and respect, whether they were a senior preparing for graduation or a freshman struggling to find their place. Dylan watched all of this unfold with a mix of awe and regret. He noticed how Samuel's presence seemed to shift the energy of the school. Teachers who had once dismissed student concerns began to listen more closely. Students who had felt overlooked found themselves invited into conversations about school policies. Even the basketball team, where Dylan still held his captaincy, seemed to benefit from Samuel's influence. One afternoon, as Dylan practiced free throws in the gym, Samuel walked in to observe. Dylan felt a pang of nervousness as he glanced over at his former target. He half expected a lecture or a reminder of his past mistakes, but Samuel simply watched in silence. After a few minutes, he approached Dylan with his calm, measured demeanor. "Your form is good, but you're rushing the follow-through," Samuel said, picking up a basketball and demonstrating the motion. "Patience leads to precision." Dylan hesitated, then tried the shot again, following Samuel's advice. The ball sailed cleanly through the hoop. Dylan turned to Samuel, a faint smile breaking through his unease. "Thanks," he said quietly. Samuel nodded, patting him on the shoulder. "You're capable of more than you realize, Dylan. Never forget that." The interaction marked a turning point for Dylan. He began to see Samuel not just as an authority figure, but as a mentor. Slowly, he started to change. He stopped making cruel jokes and began treating everyone around him with a newfound respect. When his teammates teased a younger player for missing a pass, Dylan stepped in to defend him. "We're a team," he said firmly. "We build each other up, not tear each other down." Samuel's influence wasn't limited to individual moments. He initiated significant reforms that reshaped the school's culture. Bullying policies were strengthened, with a focus on restorative justice rather than punishment. Samuel introduced mentorship programs, pairing struggling students with upperclassmen who could guide them academically and socially. He also worked closely with teachers to create more inclusive curricula, ensuring that all students saw themselves reflected in their education. Not everyone embraced the changes immediately. Some teachers resisted the idea of mentorship programs, citing concerns about workload. A few students mocked the new emphasis on respect, claiming it wouldn't make a difference. But Samuel was patient. He listened to their concerns, addressed their fears, and proved through action that his approach could work. Over time, the results became undeniable. Academic performance improved, disciplinary incidents decreased, and the school's atmosphere grew more positive. Samuel's leadership wasn't flashy or loud. It was steady, consistent, and deeply rooted in his belief that respect and empathy could transform even the most divided community. As the weeks turned into months, Dylan continued to reflect on his journey. He found himself inspired by Samuel's resilience and humility. During a team meeting, he stood up and shared something that surprised even himself. "I used to think being a leader meant being the loudest or the strongest," Dylan admitted. "But Mr. Carter showed me that real leadership is about lifting others up. I want to be that kind of leader." Samuel, standing at the back of the room, smiled quietly. Dylan's growth was a testament to the change he had worked so hard to bring about. But for Samuel, the real reward wasn't the accolades or the recognition. It was the knowledge that his actions had left a lasting impact on the school and its students, a legacy built not on power, but on respect. The announcement of Samuel Carter as the new principal was the talk of Lincoln High. Students and teachers alike were stunned by the news, and conversations buzzed in every corner of the school. For years, Samuel had been seen as the quiet janitor who kept the school running behind the scenes. Now, he was stepping into the highest position of leadership. For Dylan, the news hit differently. When he first heard it, he laughed, thinking it was some kind of elaborate joke. But as the truth sank in, disbelief gave way to an uncomfortable sense of regret. Dylan couldn't stop replaying his past actions in his mind. Every insult, every act of disrespect, and every cruel joke he had made at Samuel's expense. The man he had spent so much time mocking was now the most powerful figure in the school. At first, Dylan avoided Samuel entirely. He couldn't bring himself to face the man who had endured his taunts with quiet dignity. Every time he saw Samuel walking the halls or speaking with students, Dylan felt a pang of guilt he couldn't ignore. He spent more time than usual in the gym, throwing himself into basketball practice as a way to distract himself. It was Ms. Rivera who finally confronted him. One afternoon after class, she stopped Dylan as he was heading toward the gym. "Dylan?" she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Can we talk for a moment?" Dylan hesitated but nodded, following her into the empty classroom. Ms. Rivera closed the door and turned to face him. "I've noticed you've been keeping your distance from Mr. Carter," she began. "Why is that?" Dylan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. "I don't know," he mumbled. "I guess it's weird." Ms. Rivera raised an eyebrow. "Weird because he's no longer just the janitor? Or because you're starting to realize how wrong you were?" Her words cut through Dylan's defenses like a knife. He looked down at his hands, struggling to find a response. "You owe him an apology," Ms. Rivera continued. "It's not too late to make things right, but you need to take responsibility for your actions. Ignoring the problem won't make it go away." Dylan nodded slowly, her words sinking in. He knew she was right, but the thought of facing Samuel filled him with dread. A few days later, Dylan finally worked up the courage to approach Samuel. He found him in the cafeteria after school, tidying up after a meeting with some teachers. Samuel looked up as Dylan entered, his expression calm and unreadable. "Mr. Carter," Dylan began, his voice shaky, "can I talk to you for a second?" Samuel set down the stack of chairs he was carrying and turned to face him. "Of course, Dylan," he said evenly. Dylan hesitated, his mind racing as he tried to find the right words. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he finally said. "For everything. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I judged you without knowing anything about you, and I feel terrible about it." Samuel studied Dylan for a long moment, his expression softening. "It takes courage to admit you were wrong," he said gently. "I hope you've learned something from this." "I have," Dylan said quickly. "I'll do better. I promise." Samuel nodded. "Good. Respect isn't about who someone is or what they do. It's about how you choose to treat them, no matter what." The conversation left Dylan feeling both relieved and humbled. For the first time, he felt a genuine sense of respect for Samuel, not because of his title, but because of the man he was. The transition from janitor to principal was anything but ordinary, yet Samuel Carter embraced the challenge with quiet determination. His first day as principal set the tone for what was to come. Instead of shutting himself in the office or asserting his authority with heavy-handed decisions, Samuel walked the hallways, greeted students, and met with teachers one-on-one. His presence wasn't commanding in the traditional sense, but it carried a unique strength, built on respect, not fear. Students watched with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Many still saw him as the janitor, unsure of how to reconcile his former role with his new position. Some whispered behind his back, while others openly doubted his ability to lead. Even among the teachers, there were those who hesitated to fully trust in Samuel's leadership. But Samuel didn't let the doubts faze him. One of his first priorities was addressing the culture of disrespect and division that had plagued Lincoln High for years. Samuel introduced a series of reforms aimed at fostering a more inclusive and supportive environment. He implemented mentorship programs, pairing upperclassmen with struggling freshmen to provide guidance and support. He encouraged teachers to adopt more interactive and student-centered teaching methods, emphasizing empathy and understanding over strict discipline. One of the most impactful changes Samuel made was instituting weekly open forums, where students, teachers, and even parents could voice their concerns directly to him. These meetings quickly became a cornerstone of his leadership, allowing the entire school community to feel heard and valued. Dylan sat silently in the back of one such forum, observing as Samuel addressed a group of students and teachers. A freshman spoke nervously about being bullied in the locker room, and Samuel listened attentively, nodding as he jotted down notes. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. "We'll work on creating a safer space for everyone, and I'll personally follow up with you to make sure things improve." Dylan couldn't help but be impressed. The man he had once mocked for being just a janitor was now shaping the culture of the school in ways no one had anticipated. As Samuel's reforms took root, the school began to change. Incidents of bullying and disrespect decreased, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and mutual support. Teachers who had initially resisted Samuel's ideas found themselves inspired by his approach. "He's not just making rules," one teacher remarked. "He's leading by example." For Dylan, the transformation was deeply personal. Inspired by Samuel's leadership, he began to reflect on his own behavior and its impact on others. During basketball practice, he noticed one of the younger players being teased by his teammates for missing a shot. Dylan immediately stepped in, his voice firm but encouraging. "Hey, we're a team. We support each other, not tear each other down." The younger player looked up at Dylan with gratitude, and for the first time, Dylan felt a sense of pride that had nothing to do with his athletic ability. He was starting to understand what it meant to be a true leader. Samuel also took time to mentor Dylan directly. One afternoon, as Dylan worked on his free throws in the gym, Samuel approached him with his usual calm demeanor. "How's it going, Dylan?" he asked. Dylan shrugged. "It's okay. Just trying to improve my consistency." Samuel picked up a basketball and demonstrated a perfect shot. "It's not just about the mechanics," he said. "It's about focus and patience. You've got to trust the process." Dylan tried again, mimicking Samuel's advice. The ball swished cleanly through the net. He turned to Samuel with a small smile. "Thanks," he said. Samuel nodded. "You've got potential, Dylan, not just on the court, but as a leader. Keep working on it." As the weeks passed, Dylan found himself becoming an advocate for Samuel's vision. He joined one of the mentorship programs Samuel had introduced, helping younger students navigate both academics and social challenges. He also became more attentive to his teammates, encouraging them to treat each other with respect and understanding. But not everyone embraced Samuel's leadership so easily. A small group of students and teachers remained skeptical, grumbling that his ideas were too soft or too idealistic. One teacher, Mr. Peters, complained during a staff meeting, "These mentorship programs are just extra work for us. How do we know they're even making a difference?" Samuel listened patiently before responding. "Change takes time, Mr. Peters. But if we can help even one student feel more supported, isn't that worth it?" Slowly but surely, Samuel began winning over even his harshest critics. His ability to listen, his willingness to collaborate, and his unwavering commitment to fairness made it difficult to argue with his results. The school was becoming a better place, and it was impossible to ignore. By the end of the semester, the shift in culture was undeniable. Academic performance had improved, disciplinary incidents were at an all-time low, and students were showing more kindness and respect toward one another. For the first time in years, Lincoln High felt like a true community. Samuel's leadership wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was steady, compassionate, and deeply impactful. He had proven that respect and empathy weren't just ideals, but powerful tools for transformation. And for Dylan, Samuel's example had become a guiding light, shaping him into the kind of person he had once ridiculed. As the school year drew to a close, the buzz of change could be felt throughout Lincoln High. Samuel Carter's leadership had not only transformed the school's policies, but had also reshaped its culture. For the first time in years, students and teachers alike felt a renewed sense of pride in their community. Respect and kindness were no longer abstract ideals. They were becoming part of everyday life. The end-of-year assembly was the perfect moment to celebrate these changes. The gym was packed with students, teachers, and parents, all eager to hear Principal Carter's speech. The chatter of the crowd faded as Samuel stepped onto the stage, his presence commanding yet humble. He began with a simple statement. "This has been a year of growth for all of us." His voice was calm but resonated with the weight of someone who had lived the lessons he was about to share. Samuel spoke about the power of respect and the importance of seeing the potential in others. "Respect isn't something you earn with titles or achievements," he said. "It's something we all deserve simply because we're human. and when we treat each other with dignity, we unlock the best in ourselves and those around us. As he continued, Samuel shared a bit of his own journey, how life had taken unexpected turns, leading him to Lincoln High. "I've cleaned these hallways, fixed broken lockers, and picked up after countless events," he said, his tone tinged with reflection. "But every moment taught me something about resilience, humility, and the importance of never giving up." In the audience, Dylan sat quietly, absorbing every word. He felt a mix of emotions: pride for how far he had come, gratitude for Samuel's guidance, and humility as he reflected on his own mistakes. Samuel's speech wasn't just about his own story. It was about the collective growth of the school. He highlighted the success of the mentorship programs, the improvements in student behavior, and the ways the school community had come together. "None of this would have been possible without all of you," he said, looking out at the audience. "Change starts with individuals, but it thrives when we work together." When Samuel finished, the gym erupted into applause. Students cheered, teachers wiped away tears, and parents nodded with approval. For a moment, it felt like the school had become more than just a place for education. It had become a family. After the assembly, Dylan approached Samuel, his heart pounding with nervous energy. "That was an amazing speech, Mr. Carter," he said sincerely. Samuel smiled warmly. "Thank you, Dylan. I'm proud of you, too. You've come a long way." Dylan nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "It's because of you. You showed me what respect really means." Samuel placed a hand on Dylan's shoulder. "It's something we all have to work on, every day. But you've proven that change is possible." As Dylan walked away, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just a better student or athlete, he was a better person. The school year ended on a high note, with Samuel's story becoming a lasting symbol of resilience and transformation. His leadership had left an indelible mark on Lincoln High, inspiring students, teachers, and parents alike to carry the lessons they had learned into the future.